So where we are going to see about the dynamic lookup. So to start with, right? So what is the use of this lookup first? Tell me the use of this lookup. So what is a lookup? So what is the use of the lookup?
Lookup can be something which can be accessed. Uh, we can use that as a reference for that file or
Correct. Reference data.
something
Correct. So it's
as
more
a
of a
join. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's correct.
yeah.
So it's a kind of reference data we can store, right? So it's a reference data. So where we can get the 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 matching column. We can get the matching columns. We can get the columns. Okay, we can get the we can get the column values. We can get the column values based on key, right? So based on key, so we can do a lookup against the file based on the key value, and we can retrieve the value from the lookup, right? So there are two different types of lookup that we have. So one is static and one other is dynamic lookup. So what is the difference between a static lookup and dynamic lookup?
Static is somehow like once our graph starts, it will that the whole file will be in the memory till the end of the graph. And dynamic, we can call that or that we can load that file into the memory as and when we need, and we can also unload that file from the memory in memory when there is a no need of that file or
That's
when
correct.
the processing is done.
That's correct. That's correct. So data gets stored in memory until the job gets completed. That's right. So until the job gets completed, so the data gets stored in the memory. That's right. So if it is a dynamic lookup, so the data gets stored in the memory. The data gets stored in memory only during the lookup operation. So after the lookup operation, so the data can be unloaded, right? So data can be unloaded from memory after the lookup operation, right? So from main memory after the lookup operation, right? So then, so can we add records to the static lookup file at runtime? We cannot add, right? So we cannot add
No.
records to the lookup at runtime. But if it is a dynamic lookup, we can add records. Okay, so we can add records to the lookup at runtime. So if it is dynamic lookup, we can add records to a lookup at runtime. Okay, so that's an advantage of going for the dynamic lookup. So for using the static lookup, we use the component. So we use lookup component, right? So we use lookup component. For dynamic lookup, what is the component that we should use?
Lookup template.
Yeah, we should use lookup template component. That's correct. So we should use lookup template component. Right. So these are all the main differences between the static and dynamic lookup. So do you have any questions, Shuhash?
No.
So now we'll see on the lookup functions. Okay, so we'll see on the lookup functions with respect to the dynamic lookup. Okay, so then we can see about the component with lookup template used for the dynamic lookup operation. So for to start with, right? So the first function that we are going to see is lookup. So lookup, and so we know, right? So this lookup is a function to retrieve the value from the lookup, right? So to retrieve the values to retrieve the value a lookup from a lookup based on key value. Correct. So based on key value.
Yeah.
So if it is a dynamic lookup, okay, if it is a dynamic lookup, so what we need to do is, so we need to first create, okay, so if it is a dynamic lookup, okay, so if it is a dynamic lookup, so what we have to create, what we have to do is, so we have to create a pointer, okay, so when we say dynamic lookup, so we'll just see this so dynamic lookup. So for this dynamic lookup, so what you have to do is, so we have to create a pointer, okay, we have to create a pointer where the lookup data is stored. Okay, so where the lookup data is stored in main memory. Okay, so where the lookup data is stored in main memory. So for doing this, so for what we need to do is, so we need to use a function called lookup underscore load. Okay, so we need to call a function called lookup underscore load. So the lookup underscore load will give you, okay, the lookup underscore load function. So we have to call a function lookup underscore load. So using this lookup underscore load, so we can load the data into the main memory and we can return a pointer, which is of a type lookup identifier type. Okay, so this lookup underscore load is to load the, okay, this lookup underscore load is to load the lookup data, load the lookup data into main memory and return a pointer of type lookup underscore identifier underscore lookup underscore identifier underscore type. This is a predefined type, so it returns this lookup identifier type whenever you do this lookup underscore load. And if you load this data into the memory, we also get this lookup identifier types, which is like, so we have to define it. Let lookup underscore identifier underscore type, right? So then we have to give a name. So LID, you can give any name, okay? So we can say lookup underscore load, where we have to specify, okay? We have to specify the data file location. So the data file location is, say, for example, it is going to be a serial lookup. So in the a serial lookup, so we have a file called state underscore lkp.dat. So then we have to specify the data file, sorry, index file. So currently we don't have an index file, so we have to provide it as null. Then we have to specify the label of the lookup template component. After that, so we have to specify the load behavior. So we will see the load behaviors. Okay, we'll see the different load behavior. So we have different values, so we can give that value. So what it does is, so this loads the data into the main memory and it returns a pointer of lookup pointer of type lookup identifier. So whenever you do a lookup operation, okay, whenever we do a lookup operation, so we need to make use of this lookup identifier. So if it is a dynamic lookup, the only difference is you have to make use of the pointer. Okay, you have to use this lookup identifier. Okay, you have to make use of this lookup identifier whenever you do a lookup operation. While doing a lookup operation, you have to make use of this lookup identifier. So after using this lookup identifier, we have to specify this label of the lookup template component. So LKP state. So then you have to pass on the key column, so which is in.city. So then you have to say dot state. So only then you can be able to retrieve the state value based on the city. Okay, you can retrieve state value from dynamic lookup based on city value. So is this clear, Shreyas? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So now we'll see the load behaviors. So I said there are different load behaviors that we have, right? So this 0 corresponds to load all the records. Okay, so the 0 corresponds to load all the records. So we have different load behaviors: -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay, so we'll see this more. We'll see this one. We'll see this one by one. Okay, we'll see this one by one. This -1 we don't have here. -1 is applicable for ICFF. So -1 is not applicable for regular lookup. Okay, so here this one is an a appendable lookup file. Okay, ALF. Okay, and -2 is updatable lookup uh, file, updatable lookup file, ULF. So it is -4 is reloadable lookup file. Okay, so we will see this one by one. Okay, so when it is appendable, okay, when it is appendable lookup file, so here we can add records. Okay, we can add records to lookup file. Okay, we can add records to lookup file, and the newly added record will be available for the subsequent jobs only if the lookup underscore load is called. So you can add records in appendable lookup. You can add records to the lookup file, but newly added records will be available only if you are doing a lookup load. So whenever you do this lookup load, so only then the data will get refreshed. Okay, only then the data will get refreshed. It requires a lookup load function to be called so that the data will get refreshed in the lookup file. So if it is updatable lookup file, okay, if it is updatable lookup file, So for this updatable lookup file, so we can add we can add or we can update as inserts. Okay, we can insert. So update is nothing but, so in case of update, so we are just going to insert the records. Okay, so we insert the records into the lookup file. Okay, so we can add or update the records into the lookup file, and it will be available. Okay, it will be available for the subsequent lookup operation. Okay, it will be available for the subsequent jobs, for the subsequent jobs subsequent jobs lookup operations. Okay, subsequent jobs lookup operations, so without calling lookup underscore load function. Is this clear? That's an advantage. So then which one should we use? So whether we
Yes.
need to use ALF or ULF, which one should we use? ALF or ULF? Which one is recommended?
Recommended is, I think, ALF.
Mm.
Add it, update.
Mm. But if you use ALF, you have to call this lookup underscore load function in order to get the new record. So you need to call this lookup underscore load. So
Okay,
whenever you
without
load it
calling.
again,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, without calling. Without calling. Yes, yes.
yeah,
ULF.
ULF is recommended, right? So this we should use this ULF only. This is recommended, okay? So we should use this, so because there is
Yes.
no need to call this lookup underscore load function. Without this lookup underscore load function, the data will get loaded into the memory. So the next one is reloadable lookup file. Okay, so this reloadable lookup file is nothing but, so every time, so we have to call this lookup underscore reload. Okay, so we have to call lookup underscore reload function to to reflect the new changes into the lookup file. Okay, this reloadable lookup file will not use. So every time we have to call lookup underscore reload function. Okay, so for adding the records, right? So for adding the records, so we can have a function. Okay, so for adding the records to a lookup file, there is a function called the lookup underscore add. So we can use lookup underscore add a function to add records to a lookup file. Okay, so we can use this function. Okay, so these are all the load behaviors. Okay, so these are all the four load behaviors that we have. Okay, these are all the four load behaviors that we have. Okay, so now coming back to our lookup function. So the first function we discussed is lookup. So then you have lookup underscore first, right? So you have lookup underscore first or lookup underscore last or lookup underscore end. So this is used to retrieve. Okay, it is used to retrieve a first or last or nth record from the lookup file or nth record from the lookup file. So I'll tell about this lookup underscore nth only because others are understandable, self-explanatory, right? So if it is lookup underscore nth, so we have to specify the lookup identifier. Then we have to say LKP state. So and then we have to pass on the input city column. Okay, we have to pass on the input city column. Sorry, not the city column. You have to say LKP state lookup underscore nth. So yeah, in dot city. So you have to pass on the column. Okay, so we have to pass on the column, and then you have to specify. Okay, you have to specify the index position. Okay, you have to index position of the record that you want to retrieve. So the index position starts from 0. So if I say 0, so if I have two records, so it will return the first record. Okay, so here it is very important. Index starts from 0. Okay, index starts from 0. So 0 corresponds to the first record. 0 corresponds to the first record. So from 0 you have to count. Okay. So if you want to get the third record, so if I have three records, if I want to get the third record, so you have to use 2 for the index. If you want to get the second record, you have to say 1 as the index. This is very, very important. Okay. This lookup end. So we have to specify the index. The index ranges from 0 to record minus 1, 0 to length of records minus 1. So is this clear? Any question on this lookup underscore nth function?
Yeah, no.
Right. So now, yeah. So now, so the next is on lookup underscore first last nth function. So then we have lookup underscore add. So this lookup underscore add, right? So this lookup underscore add is to add a record, to a lookup file. Okay, it adds a record to a lookup file. So for adding a record to a lookup file, okay, so for adding a record to a lookup file, so we can use this lookup underscore add function. So we can just call lookup underscore add. So we can give LID. So then we can give LKP state. So when then we have to pass on the record that you want to add. Okay, we have to pass on the record that you have to add. So say for example, you have a city and the state value. Okay, so we can pass on the city value. So the city value is going to be, say, let's say Bangalore, and the state value is going to be so Karnataka. So we can add this to the lookup file using this lookup underscore add. So this lookup underscore add will add this record to the lookup file. Okay, this lookup underscore add will add the record to the lookup file. So the similar way we can make use of this lookup underscore match, lookup underscore count. Okay, so lookup underscore count. So all these functions can be used. So if it is a dynamic lookup, we have to use the lookup identifier. Okay, so if it is dynamic lookup, if it is dynamic lookup, then we have to use the lookup underscore identifier underscore type as the first argument, which is very important. Okay, so other than that, so if you are not giving the lookup identifier type, then it is going to be a static lookup. Okay, then it is going to be a static lookup. Right, so these are all the different lookup functions that we have for retrieving the data. Okay, so and then for the lookup operations, and also we can use this lookup underscore unload. Okay, this lookup underscore unload. So this lookup underscore unload is not required. Okay, it is an optional one. So because this lookup underscore unload will happen whenever the lookup operation gets completed. Say for example, within the reformat you are using a dynamic lookup. Once the lookup operation gets completed, so the data will get removed from the main memory. There is no need to explicitly call this lookup underscore unload function. Okay, it unloads the data from the main memory. Right. So we can just call lookup underscore unload. Okay, we can just call lookup underscore unload, and then we can pass on lookup identifier. But- So is this clear? Any questions, Suhash? Yeah, any questions, Suhash? Hello.
Yeah. Yes. I'm
Yeah, is
audible.
this clear? Yeah. You're audible now.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
audible
Yes.
now only.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Clear.
Okay. Okay. Fine. So now, so we will see the lookup template component. Okay, this lookup template component is used for dynamic lookup operations. Okay, it is used for dynamic lookup operations. So we can use this lookup template component. So for this lookup template component, you can find it under the lookup folder. Ports for this component, so there is no need to provide any ports. So parameters for this component, so we have to specify the record format and the key. So there is no need to specify the file. So because while calling the lookup underscore load function, we are specifying the file, right? So there is no need to call the file. So we need to specify the record format and we have to specify the key. So key is nothing but column based on which we have to retrieve the data. So we have to specify the column based on which we have to retrieve the data from lookup file. Okay, so is this clear? Any questions, Suhash? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay,
Not so far.
so now, yeah, so now we will see the scenarios. Okay, we will see the use cases for doing this dynamic lookup operation. Okay, we will see the scenarios for doing this dynamic
I
lookup
think.
operations. Yeah.
I think we have two more parameters in the lookup template. Keep disk and what is that next one?
Yeah. So we can use that parameter. Okay, we can use that parameter.
Uh,
So we normally
for the
won't
S
use that.
S uh,
We use default values. Okay, we use default
values.
values,
Mhm.
right? So we use default
Okay,
value.
okay.
What is the default value?
For I think keep disk no.
Yeah, it is false only.
Keep
So
false. Yeah, false.
default is false. Okay, so default is false. So which means after the lookup operation, okay, after the lookup operation, so say for example, whatever the temporary file. So say if the lookup data is huge. So if the lookup data is huge, it will not keep all the data in the main memory, right? So it will keep the data in the hard disk as well. So whenever it keeps the data in the hard disk, so after the lookup operation, whether I need to have the temporary files in the hard disk, or whether I need to remove that temporary files. We have to remove the temporary files, right? There is no need to keep the temporary files. So that reason only we always use this default option. We will not change this option. If you want to keep the temporary files, you can set this as true. Otherwise, you can keep it as false.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Fine then. So now, anything else? Any other questions?
Uh, no.
So now, let's say, so if I have to retrieve the state value from the state lookup file, okay, so if I have to retrieve the state value from the state lookup file, which has city and the state column, so how do I retrieve the state value from the state lookup file, which has city and the state value? So I have to do a dynamic lookup. So if I want to do a dynamic lookup, so how do I do that? So design a job. So tell me what all the components that you use within your ab initio graph. So then we can see on the transformation logic that we have to write for retrieving the value from the lookup file.
We'll have to first define the lookup identifier, then
Yeah,
use
but
that
before that, lookup
lookup
template is
load.
required, right? Yeah, but before
Yeah, yeah.
that, yeah, you are right. But before that, first lookup template we should use. So we have to give the
Mm,
label. So the label is lookup state, right? So and then we have to specify the key column. So it is city, right? So these are all the parameters that we
yeah.
have to specify. So then you have to read from an input file. So say the input file is a customer file. So you have to read from the input customer file. So after reading from this customer file, then you have to use a reformat component. So then after this reformat component, you have to write it to an output file. So within the reformat, you have to write the logic. Yeah, now tell me the logic that you have to write within the reformat component. What is the logic that you write
Mm,
within the reformat?
Aji, a lookup identifier.
Hmm. First, you have to create the lookup
Create a
identifier,
lookup
right? Right.
identifier. Lookup
So let
identifier. I
right.
am
So
not
let
able to
lookup
call
underscore
the
identifier underscore type
what
LID is equal
the
to lookup
the
underscore load. We have to
load.
specify the location of the
Yeah.
lookup, so which is dollar AI underscore serial underscore lookup.
Serial.
So within that, so you have the state underscore LKP dot DAT. So then we have to specify the index file. We don't have an index
Null.
file. You can keep it as null. So then we have to specify the label
City.
of the lookup template. No, label of the lookup
Okay.
template component. And then we have to specify the load behavior. So the zero, we have to load all the records. So we don't have any condition. We are not going to add records to the lookup file. So we are just going to retrieve the value from the lookup file. So we can just use the default load behavior. So after that, so we can just here we can just say state. So for the state, so while doing a lookup operation, so we can use lookup of. So we can just pass on this line. So then we can say lkp state. So then we can pass on in dot city. So and you can retrieve the state value. That's it. For the other columns, it's a direct mapping. Out that star, in that star. Okay. Is this clear? Hello? Hello? Sugash, you
Sorry,
there?
I was speaking on. Yeah, sorry. I was speaking on
Not a
mute.
problem.
Yes, yes.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem. Okay. So now I will ask one question. Okay. So let's say this global variable, right? So it is defined as a global. So is it recommended to
Mm.
define it as a global, or we should define it as a local variable? So whether we have to define this LID outside the function or inside the function? Which one is
Mm,
recommended,
okay.
outside or inside?
Let me
Hmm.
just give me a minute.
Yeah.
No, not actually.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem.
Miss,
It is.
miss the difference we have it in the local, defining in the local and the global. Why
Yeah,
we
yeah, that's
define
correct.
it
See,
as
if
a
it is
global?
yeah, see, it is global is the right one, right? So because if you define it as local, so the data will get loaded for every record. Say if I have 1,000 records, so for every record
Okay,
the lookup
okay,
will get refreshed. So which is
okay.
not the right one to do, right? So we should always do the refresh only once. After doing a lookup refresh only once, so we have to make use of that lookup file, right?
Okay.
Right. That's right. So now we'll come back to the next use case. So the next use case is, so we have two lookups, Suraj. So one is country specific city and the state information. So US lookup, Asia Pacific lookup. Okay. So based on the input country from the customer file, so we have to make use of the corresponding lookup file and retrieve the state value based on the city. So if it is US, if the country is US, so you have to do the lookup in the US lookup file. If the country is Singapore or Malaysia, so then we have to make use of this Asia Pacific lookup to retrieve the value. So if we have to do this, so what are all the components that we should use for this use case?
Lookup template. Two lookup
Yeah.
templates we have it.
Do we really need to lookup template?
Okay. We are loading that as a at runtime. So one lookup template only
Yeah,
is
yeah,
suffice.
because it is going to have city and the state. Record format is going to be the same. There is no change in the
Okay.
record format. So since the record format is same, we can use one single lookup. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. Input
Now, what are
file.
all the input file? Correct reformat and output file. That's it.
Reformat
Input file,
output.
reformat, and output file. Right. So these are all the components that we should use. So with now the logic, you can tell me the logic within the reformat component. What is the logic that we should use within the reformat component?
Country. We have to load the country specific lookup.
Yeah. First, let's say I'm loading the US lookup. Okay. So I'm just loading the US lookup first. So after I load this US lookup, so can we check like this? Can we
Yes.
check if in dot country, if in dot country equal to US, right? So if it is equal to US, so then we can directly get the value from the lookup file itself, right? So because we have loaded only the US lookup, so based on the city, we can get the corresponding state value, right? So we can just have a column called v underscore state. So v underscore state is equal to, so we can retrieve the state value. So else if in dot country, okay, in dot country is equal to, if it is equal to APAC, Asia Pacific. So then what we should do? If it is Asia Pacific, then what we have to do? What is the logic for v underscore state?
Okay. Lookup.
But before that,
Same logic.
we have the lookup already loaded, right? So we have to unload it and we have to load the Asia Pacific lookup. So we have to say lookup underscore
Okay.
unload of lookup ID. So after that, so we have to say lookup identifier is equal to, we have to load the Asia Pacific specific lookup file, right? So we have to load the Asia Pacific specific lookup file. So after you load this Asia Pacific specific lookup file, so here you have to load the Asia Pacific ASPAC lookup file. Okay, we have to load the Asia Pacific lookup file. After you do this Asia Pacific lookup file, then we can
Okay.
use this lookup underscore lookup function to retrieve the Asia Pacific state value, city and the state value. You can do a lookup based on city, and then you can do the corresponding state values. So if it is else, so we can just say v
Hmm.
underscore state as v underscore state as null. Right? So and also here you have three statements, right? If I have more than one statement, you have to enclose it within begin and end. It is a block statement, so
Yes.
you have to enclose it within begin and end. This is very important. So now
Yes.
coming back to our example, so we have to create variables, correct? So we have to create variable for, so let string of blank v underscore state is equal to blank. So because we are using this v underscore state for populating the value, we have to define that v underscore state. And for this output out dot state, we have to say v underscore state, right? So we have to say v underscore state for the out dot state. So is this clear? Any questions, Suhash?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Now tell me in this use case. whether we have to define it
Mhm.
outside or inside. In this example, so the lookup identifier, whether we have to define it outside or inside.
One can one can be defined at the global
Okay.
as, as we have defined, but the for the
Okay.
other case, or
Okay.
in this case we can have that as a local as well.
Yeah, we should have it as a local, right? So because let's say the first one itself is an Asia Pacific. So first one itself is an Asia Pacific. So say you have unloaded the data and then you loaded this Asia Pacific. So now in the main memory, you have Asia Pacific specific lookup. For the second record, so you need, say the second record is going to be in US. So if it is an US, so then it will try to get the value from the US specific, Asia specific file, right? So which is incorrect.
Hmm.
So we have to do this within the, we have to do this within the reformat function, right? So we have to do it within the reformat function. Yeah, it has to be defined locally. In this case, it has to be defined locally. So based on the case by case, we can decide whether we have to define it globally or whether we have to define it locally. Is this
Don't we
clear,
have
Shugash?
to?
Hmm.
Yeah, don't we have to also define the lookup unload at the US?
Hmm. 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 What was that?
We'll have to also define the lookup unload function, right? On for
Lookup
the
underscore unload.
country
Lookup underscore. Hmm. Once that
unload
state
at
gets.
for the country.
Correct. Correct. That's right. So we have to define that. Correct. So after this state value assignment, we have to unload that value.
Mhm.
Correct. So we have to say unload. So the unload is common for both the cases. For all the cases, the lookup unload is common, right? So what we can do is we can just move this
Hmm.
lookup unload outside of the for if else if statements. So here you can just say lookup unload of
Hmm.
LID, right?
Yes.
Right. Fine then. So any other questions, Shugas? Do you have any other questions?
Mm, no, clear.
Okay. Now I'll give a scenario for you. Okay. So you just think of the scenario. We will see the answer in the next class. Okay. So this is
Sure.
my scenario. So I have a trades file, intraday trades file, so which has the multiple versions of a trade. You can see this group. Okay, so you can see multiple versions of the trade. So what I need is I need a differential cost. Okay, so for this differential
Mm-hmm.
cost, the value should be the current version minus previous version. So if there is no previous version, then it has to be zero. The differential cost is going to be zero. So for the second case, right, for the V1 it is zero. For the V2 it is going to be minus 0.15, and for this V3 it is going to be my plus 0.20. Okay, so we have to calculate the differential cost. So the output should be like this. Okay, this is my input record. The output should be like this. Okay, the output should be like this. Differential card output should be like this. So you just think how we can do this using this dynamic lookup operation. So there are multiple ways to do it, right? So you just tell me how, if I give the scenario, how do you do this? If I give the scenario to you to identify the differential cost, so how do you do that?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, think of this.